In the last couple of lessons, we have learned about motion tracking, whether that is camera tracking or object tracking. Now let's talk about match moving. In a sense, match moving also means motion tracking, because in motion tracking, you are tracking the motion of objects, whether that be the camera or specific objects in the scene. Now for match moving, you are matching the motion or the movement of objects in your scene or the camera in your scene. So it's basically the same thing, but the reason why I'm having a separate lesson for this is because for a lot of shots, you would like to rebuild your real scenes in 3D. So after tracking the camera in your scene, depending on your idea, sometimes you'll have to rebuild the floors, the walls, any chairs, tables, any structure in the scene that will basically fit into your own idea. For example, if there is a wall in your scene and your object is right beside it, and naturally the sun is on the opposite side of the wall, naturally the sun will cast shadows on that wall. So you need to have that wall in your 3D scene. If there are chairs or things in the scene, like actual inanimate objects that are catching shadows in the real world, you have to have those things represented in 3D so they can accurately catch those shadows. You can see how these things are catching the shadows of the 3D objects in the scene. It creates a lot more realism when you have your real objects recreated in 3D. So you can either use them as shadow catchers or just to catch reflections or as rigid body objects for simulation. So there are a lot of use cases here. So in these lessons, we are going to cover how to recreate your scenes in 3D and how to capture accurate reflections and texturing. So we have a brand new blend file right here. Let's go to our VFX motion tracking tab. Now I'm going to drop in our background video. Now let's set scene frames and hit prefetch like we normally do. I could have gone straight to recreating this scene in 3D, but I wanted us to get more practice in camera tracking. So it's a very simple basic scene. The camera had some form of motion, and the goal here is to try to add cylinders to line up with these cylinders here in the real scene, to add cubes or planes to line up with this wall, to add geometry that will line up with this spot and this spot, even this pose right here. So let's start with camera tracking the scene. Let's go to the first frame and detect features. I think we have some features here. Let's click here and reduce this threshold so we have more features. I like to have a lot of features on the floor, so let's reduce the distance. I'm holding shift so it doesn't move too fast. Let's reduce the threshold a little bit more. I think I like this. Now one thing you can also do is to click on normalize. That basically makes Blender accounts for changes in the lighting of your scene. So if it goes from cloudy to sunny in one scene, Blender knows to normalize the entire scene, so it takes account of the changing in the lighting. Something else we can try for this track is to change the match from keyframe to previous frame. It is something I've been experimenting with lately to get me better tracks. So since this is not a complex scene, let's just work with it. At frame 1, let's hit track forward. Nice, Blender successfully tracked the scene from the beginning to the end. Now let's go to the last frame and detect features again at the last frame, then track backwards. Usually this is enough for most scenes, but there are some times where there are features in the middle that would be missed because you started your track from the beginning or the end. So it's just good practice that I've gotten used to track from the middle again. So let's go to 140 and detect features again, then track backward, then go back to 140 and track forward. Alt D to disable these markers. Cool, now let's go through our visual pass of deleting the bad tracks. So these ones that are just going crazy, going out of line, let's just take them out. You can see if we go here, you can see it's just shaking a lot. Let's take them out. This is not a camera tracking lesson. So let's just do this real quick. After that, let's go to solve, then click solve camera motion. Currently have some crazy number, 166 pixel. Don't let that deter you. Let's just clean up and clean tracks, then drag this reprojection error forward so we have some of the markers selected. X to delete, and let's solve the camera motion again. There are some tools here to help you out. You click on clip display. The Alt D that we click to remove those red markers, that is this checkbox here, show disabled. You can also display info. If I click on info, you'll be able to see the average error of each of these tracking markers. So if I hit A to select all, you'll see some of the markers are 37 pixels, 18, 17, 8, 10. So when we are increasing our reprojection error and deleting, what we are doing is basically selecting the ones that have much error or high error and deleting them. So let's turn off the info and do that entire thing again. Let's go to clean tracks, increase the reprojection error. I'm holding shift so I don't move too fast. Then X to delete. Let's solve the camera motion again. 23, let's do that a couple more times. Now let's refine focal length and optical center and solve again. Okay, this has increased. Let's clean tracks again, increase the reprojection error and delete. Solve camera motion. It's still something super high. Let's clean tracks again, increase, delete, solve camera motion again. Now we'll have a 0.57. We jumped from a 133, 131 to a 0.57. Let's clean tracks again and select just a few this time. Not too many. X, delete, solve camera motion. I'll have a 0.49. I think we should work with this. It's below 5, so let's just go with this. So let's come to output and make sure this is 1080 by 1920. And let's come here and set up tracking scene. Then click 3 of these markers on the floor and hit floor. So Blender positions this on the floor. We can go left and right to make sure we are kind of following the entire scene. Yeah, let's click on the cube, edit mode, GZ1, and let's also make the ground invisible, so hide it. And let's see. Yeah, I think it's well tracked. So we need to set our scale, but first of all, let's set the origin. Let's set the origin to this center. Click on just this point and click set origin. Yeah, then for scale, the way to think about it is you need to look at 2 markers on the floor and try to approximate how far away from each other you think they are. I think this and this is about 1.5 meters. This and this is about, let's say, 1.2 meters. So let's click this and this one, then put 1.2 here. This number is in meters, then set scale. Yeah, this cube is 2 by 2 meters. So this is what 2 by 2 meters should look like. It is actually quite huge. Now that we have this, let's go to the layout tab, go into the camera view, click on the camera properties, background images, increase the opacity so we can see it properly. Now we can reduce the size of this. Yeah, we can see it's very well attached to the floor. Yeah, so our scene is tracked. Yeah, we have gone through the camera tracking process again. So we want to rebuild this scene. We want to build this wall here, this seat here, and to do that we need to first enable the motion tracking markers. So all these markers you're seeing here, you can be able to see them in your 3D viewport, so you use them as a reference to do your modeling. So let's go to layout, click on this button here, this drop down, then select motion tracking. Now you'll be able to see, you can see your motion tracking points. As you scroll to and fro, you can see all those points, the same points that you have here. There's a point on this edge, one is here, one is here. We have the same thing here. Let's hide the cube. See, different points here. So you know for a fact that this is a point on the floor. You know for a fact that this marker here is a point very close to this cylinder right here. So you can see it's stuck to where the cylinder is. Same thing with this side. This edge, you can see that this marker is stuck to exactly where this edge is. So it helps you as reference to rebuild your scene. Let's delete this background. Delete. Let's delete this foreground. We don't need that yet until we start talking about render passes. So let's bring our ground back. Let's scale it down so it's quite small. If you try aligning your camera axis on this motion tracking tab, say we click on this or this guy here and set X axis, and it doesn't rotate how you like it, there's a way to align it in your 3D viewport. Just change this to 3D cursor, click on the camera, go into camera view, and just RZ until you are lining up with the axis. So what I want is for this Y axis to line up with this line here. So RZ, yeah, I think we have it, and we are still tracked to the floor. So that's like a quick way to make sure you're aligned. So let's take it back from 3D cursor to median point. So click on the ground. Let's make this visible, the move tool. Then let's move the ground close to the edge here. So you can see it's pretty much lining up with this edge. Because we have rotated the entire scene, it's lining up well. So let's scale on the y-axis. So SY to basically line up with this entire wall here. So just bring it forward here. Just bring it in a bit. If we go into the wireframe view, you can see we are pretty much lining up with this edge. What does that mean? It means that when we go into our edit mode, edge select and click on this edge, and we do an extrude like E, Z, and we extrude upwards, you can see we are following exactly this line over here. We're just following it accurately until we get somewhere here. Let's see here. Yeah. Now you can see this side is not aligning, so you would make some minor adjustments while you are doing this process. So let's go to vertex select, click on this vertex out here, then G, Z to bring it up so you line up properly. Now, because this is like a bulge here, let's go back to edge select, click on this edge. Let's go to wireframe mode. You can see that this part of the seat came out a bit. So one way we can do it is to, let's bring this up a bit. So it's basically inside. Then EX to bring this out a bit. Yeah, so we extruded it a bit so there is like a platform here on this top. So let's go back to the camera view, EZ to bring it up. Make sure this front is aligning here. And if the back doesn't align, let's do the same thing. Click on this particular vertex, GZ, and bring it up. Yeah. Now go back to edge select, click on this edge, EX to extrude on the X axis. Now we have basically created this part of the scene. So let's right click and shade flat so we can see what we were doing. Yeah, so you can see this bulge on this seat has basically been created. And if I go to wireframe view and I play, you see that it is pretty much stuck to the scene. It is stuck to the scene exactly where it's meant to be. So it's not wobbling around because we have camera tracked. So if we place anything on top of this seat right here in 3D, the shadows will cast properly. And speaking of shadows, let's figure out our lighting. Let's add in our cube, go into the solid view, no, into the rendered view. Let's change this to cycles. Let's change this to GPU. Now you can see that this is a very sunny day. You can see the shadows. Let's make this invisible. H to hide. Let's hide this. You can see the shadow is coming this way. You can see even the shadows of this straight lines are coming this way. So you want a afternoon sunny day HDRI that is casting shadows like this. You can see the shadows of the objects here. It is a very sunny day. So let's just hit download. Now in Blender, in our world properties, you can go to color, environment texture, open, and open white street 01. Now when we go into rendered view, let's go to render, film, and transparent. Yeah. Now let's bring back our ground and bring back our cube. Now you can see it is working, but we are having the wrong direction. So let's come here to shading, object, world, click on this. This is the HDR image. Ctrl T, so we can have our mapping node. Let's change this back to object. Go to layout, come back here. Then under vector mapping, we can adjust the rotation. So let's just rotate this until it's facing the correct direction. Let's try to match this with this. So let's delete this cube. Shift A, add a cylinder, edit mode GZ1, and scale it down. S Shift Z. So scale it down a lot. Yeah, so it's like a cylinder, so it matches this. So you can get the exact angle. So let's adjust this until it matches what we have here. Yeah, I think this is quite good. Let's bring it here so we have a better view. Yeah, it's not quite there. So let's just adjust this a bit until it lines up properly. You want the shadows to be perpendicular. Yeah, this is good. This is perfect. So now that we have this, let's go to solid view. We have this. We can now continue building the entire scene out. So clicking on the ground, we can go into edit mode, select all these edges here, and just drag it using G, Y, and just drag it out until you have covered the entire scene. Yeah, you don't want it popping out when you slide to and fro. Cool. Now we can click on this. Let's make the move tool selected and just bring it here to try to match this guy here. Yeah. We can also use vertex select to bring this one down here. Now, how do we create this part of the wall? We can do that by adding a loop cut. So Ctrl R, and make sure you can see this one here in the center. Then just click, then drag your mouse until you line up with exactly this point. Yeah. So what we can do here is to go to edge select, click on this side, and then extrude EX and extrude it out here. Just try and line it up here. You can see what we have here now is we have this edge. So it's a good idea to just pop in and out of your 3D view so you can see it. So we have this edge. If I scroll back and forth, you can see we are basically attached to this edge. And the next thing we need to do is to bring these edges upwards. So let's come back here. Let's go into wireframe view so we can clearly see what we are doing. Click on this edge, and this edge, these three. Then EZ to extrude upward. Yeah. Then let's bring this here. Since this line is not lining up with this, let's bring this here until we are lining up. Yeah. Let's bring it up a bit. Yeah. So when we go into solid view, you can see we have basically created this edge. So we are basically building the scene up. So you can get as specific as you want. Just to confirm, you should scroll to and fro to make sure everything is sticking properly. For example, you can see this is not lining up with the wall properly. So we can go into edit mode, click on this vertex, and bring it on this axis, the X axis. So it lines up properly now with the floor. Yeah. You can also do it with this guy. Let's bring it up to line up here. Bring it down a bit. Yeah. So for these cylinders here, so far we have been eyeballing things, right? We have been using our eyes to find where the edges are. And the reason why we could do that is because when we added the ground in the beginning, we were 100% sure that this ground plane is stuck to the floor. So that's why we could start there and extrude things to the right, extrude things to the left, because we are sure we are starting on the ground plane. So whenever we get to the edge of the wall, we can just extrude. But when we want to add this cylinder, for example, there is no point of reference to tell us exactly where this cylinder is, you know? So we need to use these markers. That is why we have these markers here. Now, depending on the markers you have, you can use these markers to find different points in your scene. For example, this marker right here is attached to this pole right here. So if we go back to layout, we know that these markers here signify where this pole is, way over here. So we can add a cube and bring it way over there. Then we can go into edit mode, GZ1. Then we can bring the cube over here. Where is the marker again? These two. So bring the cube to where the markers are. So this one is here. Bring it around here. Now we can adjust it to fit the reference, which is this pole here. So let's bring it here. Let's scale it down. Let's scale it on the Z-axis. And just try to make sure, since this marker is right on top of the front of the pole, so let's try to make sure our cube is also on top of this marker. So we have this marker here. Let's just bring our cube so it's right on top of the marker. This is how you get accurate match moving. Because if you don't do this using your markers, you might have some sliding occurring. You don't want that. So let's S Shift Z to scale this down a bit. Let's bring this here a bit. S Shift Z to just match this. Yeah. Now let's just test to see if we have been doing nonsense all this while. To do that, we can just slide down here, and if our cube is following exactly where this lamp is, this lamp stand, then you know we have done a good job. If I play the video and you can see this cube is exactly following the lamp, you know you have done a good job with match moving. So let's scale it down, S Z, somewhere here. Now you can just model this as closely as possible as you can. Now the reason I don't do super detailed modeling for this is because most of the times I need these things as shadow catchers. I'm not using these models as an actual model, like I'm not going close up into them. I'm just using them as a background to catch the shadows in my scene, or as something to use as reflections in my scene. So I don't need to do super accurate modeling here. So let's go into edit mode, select this top vertices, let's bring this down, and let's extrude and bring it up and scale it down. Just try to follow the way the object is in the background. Scale it down a bit, extrude, bring it up, adjust it to fit, scale it down here, extrude, bring it up, scale it up a bit, extrude, extrude again, scale it down. We're just trying to briefly model this as closely as possible. Now let's do a final extrude and bring it up. Let's bring it up here, and let's try to scale this down so it's as slim as this. Yeah. Now when we go back and we play, you would see it seems like that object is just there. It's just right there because it's stuck to the scene. So this is the same principles, the same routine you go through to model every point in this scene. So when you are tracking, you should try as much as possible to keep markers in, so you can use those markers as reference. For example, I would like to model these cylinders here, but then there are no markers here. So there are two ways we could do this. We could just eyeball it like I've been doing. We could bring this around here, bring this here, and try to line up the bottom. Try to line it up here, scale it down, Shift Z. That is one way to go. Let's scale it SZ on the Z axis. Let's come here, select this top vertices, bring it over here. Now this is one way to go to align this. If I hit play, it should stick to it, but it's not very accurate. You can see it's sliding to and fro. It's sliding out of place. Yeah, it's sliding out of place. While this one is not sliding anywhere. This one is stuck exactly where it's meant to be because we used the tracking markers as reference. So let's go into the motion tracking tab to see if we have any markers here. We have this one. What is this one connected to? And we know this is the marker. We know this is our cylinder. You can see that this marker is meant to be right on top in front of the cylinder. So let's bring the cylinder back here and just place it right in front here. Let's see if that makes a difference. Cool. Now let's try and align the feet, GY, align the feet with this one here, and also align the top. Just in edit mode, just drag this here till it lines up, and let's play it back to see how well it fits. I just noticed that this is not well lined up, so let's fix that. Let's click on this and just bring them up to make sure they're lining up with this right here. Yeah, and same thing here. Let's make sure that this one is lining up here. Yeah, so yeah, it's better now. So depending on how many markers you lose while you're doing your camera solve, when I did mine the first time, I had a lot more markers here, so I could easily find where these points are. But then let's try to do something else. We know for a fact where this marker is. If we go back to motion tracking, we know this marker right here is right. This one is right at this point. Right at this point on the floor, on this tile. Now what we can do is to take this this cylinder, make sure it's touching the ground, and bring it to this point where this marker is. So just click on the cylinder and bring it here to this point. So you know this cylinder and this marker are sharing the same exact point at this point in the scene. Now, a trick we can do is to drag this on the y-axis, so we know we are exactly at this point on this tile. We can drag this here, drag this here, and drag this here, just following the tiles. So we know we are in this exact point, and drag this back. Now let's bring this down and try to align it here. Let's do a S Shift Z to make it slimmer. And let's play to see if we have it tracked. Yeah, we have it tracked to the scene. So you can see this cylinder is already following the entire scene. So we could do a Shift D, Y, and move it to this point for this one. You could adjust the top in edit mode. So we have this two, and we could keep doing that until we have the entire, all the cylinders. So it depends on your video, right? You might not have to go through all this stress depending on the exact video you're trying to create. For example, in this video, I'm trying to put a cube. For example, do I have a cube? Let's add a new cube, or let's add a sphere. Mesh UV sphere. Let's bring it up, GZ1. Make sure it's touching the floor. And let's scale this down, bring it forward here. Now, if this is the subject of our video and we have it placed here, you know that this will cast a shadow on this wall. So if this is casting a shadow on this wall, we need to have this wall in place. So depending on the complexity of your scene, sometimes you might not need to do all this elaborate recreation of the 3D scene. For example, in this case, if the entire concept is to just have a simple product, say a ball or something right here, you don't need to do all this, since the shadow just ends up here and it's cut off here. But if your concept is requiring you to cast a shadow on the wall, probably your product is this close, you can see it's casting a shadow on the floor and on the wall. And you can see it is bending appropriately. It's bending appropriately because we have this part of the wall. You can also extend this wall, go into the wireframe view, click on the ground, edit mode, click on this, edge select, this. We could extrude, go out here, extrude, bring it in here, extrude, bring it here, extrude, bring this out here, then bring it in here, and extrude upwards, EZ, and try to just line this up here. So let's just bring this here. So we have created something like an outline. You can see the parallax is accurate. This is the actual edge, which represents this edge of this building. And this other edge represents the other side, like this other side. You can see it's just accurately sticking to the right place. Yeah, I can bring this back here. The detail of your modeling is up to you. You can get as detailed as possible and model every single part of this. Like, I mean, this pipes here, this knot here, if that is what you want to do. If the kind of concept you are doing is very detailed, for example, if there is a fluid that is flowing down these walls, you need to have all this geometry. But then if what you're trying to do is to just catch shadows, you don't need complex geometry for your shadow catchers. So this is a shadow catcher. Now for these ones, we also need to make this a shadow catcher. So let's come here to Object, Visibility, Shadow Catcher for each and every one of these. Yeah, and even for this guy back here, you need to make it a shadow catcher. So remember, it's the same exact process to get these cylinders here, to get this cylinder here, to get this one here, this pole here. So far you have your tracking markers on top of this point. You can find exactly where it is in 3D space. And if you don't have your tracking marker on it, then you have to eyeball it. But then that is not as dependable. You can't trust that as much because it might slide. But then when you have your tracking markers right on top of the object, you can find exactly where the object is to be able to get a perfect match move. Now, the final thing I want to talk about here would be camera projection. So remember what we talked about texturing? If I bring our sphere back and make this sphere blue, so I make it a blue sphere, it is kind of reflective, kind of metallic, make it a darker blue, yeah, and shade smooth. Now this is our sphere here. You can see the bottom of the sphere is reflecting this ground, but since the ground is white, you can see in the material view, this is just a white material. It is reflecting that white on top of it. If I change this to red or pink, you'd see it's reflecting that material. And the method we have been using throughout this course is to add a texture, find an image texture of these tiles or of something brick like this or something black and metallic like this and replacing it. That is one way to go, but that is a longer way to go. If I want to put out this type of videos really quickly, I usually use something called camera projection. And to do that, let's go into our shading tab. Now for this material, this one right here, let's add an image texture and connect the color to this color. Now in the image texture, let's open the background video. So find the background video and open it and set the frames. So I think this is how many frames? 280 frames. Let's go back here and set the frames to 280. Now you wouldn't see anything yet because you have not unwrapped this entire geometry. So let's hit Ctrl A to apply the scale. Now let's make sure we are in our camera view. Then go into edit mode with this selected, hit U and project from view. So this basically takes the view of the camera and projects it. Now let's change this from repeat to mirror. And also make sure you select auto refresh so it moves with the entire video. Now let's click on our camera properties and increase this viewport display passport 2, increase this to 1. Now you can see this looks very messed up. This does not look accurate at all. Let's go back to the shading tab, select this floor. Now what we want to do is to click on this image, then hit Ctrl T. Make sure Node Wrangler is enabled so this works. Then you want to change this connection from UV to window. So instead of going from UV to vector, go from window to vector. So what this does is it basically tells Blender that whenever you're looking through the camera view, you should take the video and project the video onto the ground, onto the walls, onto the mesh. So let's go back to our layout tab. You can see now in here, in the material view, we have the exact material of this in here. Yeah. When we come out here, it looks messed up because we're not looking through the window of the camera. But when we go into the window of the camera view, we have the same exact material. So let's go into rendered view. Let's remove the shadow catcher from this so we can see it clearly. So just disable shadow catcher. So you can see as I'm enabling and disabling shadow catcher, it looks very similar. I think it's just a little bit brighter. So let's fix that. Let's go to shading tab. In between the image and the principal BSDF, let's add a gamma node and place it in between the image and the principal BSDF. And let's just hold shift and mess with this gamma until we have what we're looking for. Something that is not that bright, something like this. Let's compare. Let's bring it up a bit. Yeah. So this is basically going to cast the correct reflection onto our object. You can see the bottom of the object is catching the correct reflections. If I remove this, if I disconnect this base color and I set this to pink, you can see the entire object is catching this pink color. Let's make this a shadow catcher again. Visibility, shadow catcher. You can see while you have the shadows on the ground, you're having a pink highlight on top of your object, which you don't want. You want the reflection on your object to be the exact texture of the material around it. So let's connect this back and you'll see now it looks a lot more realistic. And we'll do the same thing for this, guys. This cylinders here. will also make them have the same material. So let's take this material 2, which is let's change it to cam projection or cam project. Yeah, so for this one, also pay attention to the roughness. For example, this guy right here is a metallic material. This is a metallic object, while this floor is more of a rough object. So let's separate these two materials. For this one, let's click on this 2. So this is camera project 01. For this one, let's increase the metallic. Yeah. And for this one, let's increase the roughness. Yeah. Let's remove the shadow catcher from this so we can see it. It has the exact material that we needed to have. It's no longer white. It now has the exact material. From the camera view, it has the perfect material around it. So the same thing for this guy, camera project 01. Same thing for this guy, cam project 01. This is how you get realistic looking reflection on top of your object. So if we bring this ball up here and make it even larger, it's going to cast a shadow on this wall and it's going to have the accurate reflection on top of it because of this camera projection thing that we did. So there are a lot of ways to do camera projection. You could also bake the texture onto the geometry, but this is the quickest way to get accurate reflections. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So I want you to take your time with this. Depending on the concept you're going for, this is a very use case type thing. Sometimes you would not need to do any of this, but depending on the scene that you're filming, for example, there are some scenes that would have a window or a door and you need to line up your geometry with that door. That is situations you use skills like this. So up next, we'll talk about rendering very quickly, the simplest settings to render your animations out. If you have this image like this, how to bring it out as an image or as an animation, and the best render settings that I would use to get the fastest renders out. So I'll see you in the next lesson.